Hi, I'm Kristen Vanhees with SM Energy, and I'm going to go a little bit higher level, pun intended, and talk about aerial flyovers and what we're actually seeing happening when you look at methane kind of across our entire basin. So SM has had a version of an aerial flyover program for a couple years now, even back when we were XCL. And really the goal of these programs is to leverage like the rapid evolvement that we've seen in this technology over the years. So we want to rapidly identify leaks, we want to quantify those emissions, and we really want to target our field response. And what I mean by that is we don't have our guys, our OGI techs, behind their windshield all day long, driving around looking for leaks at facilities that aren't actually leaking. We want them to have an exact spot to go to so they can get to that leak quicker and get it fixed quicker. And that's really the goal in the long term. And then there's, of course, all of these side benefits of it, like less windshield time, it's safer for them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as much as we can leverage this technology, look at more sites in a shorter amount of time and pinpoint those leaks, we're all really benefiting from it. The other big benefit in why we just did our most recent field-wide flyover in September is we can actively find all of our leaks and address them prior to ozone season starting. As we all know, ozone season is in the winter here, and so SM's goal was to really figure out what is going on at all of our facilities, not just ones that have regulatory requirements like that are applicable to Quad OA or Quad OB, but everywhere across the board, and really deal with those problem areas prior to them starting to contribute to our ozone problem here in the winter. These two maps here on the bottom are really just a visual showing the difference of what you can get to in a plane versus a car. So obviously the left side is, you can see somewhere between 5 to 15 sites a day if you're manually going out to site with an OGI camera and looking for leaks. If you're doing this in a plane, you can survey 100 plus sites a day. So much, much, much more efficient, especially as our company and our asset areas grow. So the scope for this particular flyover, there are a bunch of different vendors that do this. I'm sure a bunch of people here have used different ones. This specific case, we used a company called Bridger Photonics. And our flyover time frame was the 24th to the 26th of September. So if you saw some low flying planes around that time, probably what you were seeing. The technology is called LiDAR, so it is a laser-based methane quantification system. And in this case, our sensitivity was 3 kilograms per hour at a 90% probability of detection. And so essentially what that means is if there are 100 leaks out there, we will catch 95 or 90% of them in its simplest form. That sensitivity can be at different thresholds. If you're using a program like this for compliance purposes, like through Quad OA or Quad OB, it's very prescriptive on what you have to use. But if you're using them for voluntary purposes, like a find and fix program, then you can kind of leave it up to the operator on what they want. And it really comes down to what their goal is. This next kind of chunk of bullets won't surprise anyone. The type of assets we inspected are everything that we have out there. Single well sites, multi-well sites, booster stations. We saw wellheads, tanks, separators, flares, facility piping, compressors, generators, everything under the sun. So everything that SM operates, we surveyed. The little image there, the broken out view, is really what you see as a result. So one of the big benefits of these flyovers is you get real-time aerial imagery of all of your facilities. So you're not relying on the last time Google Earth went out there and updated the map, but you get actual real-time views of what's going on. And then they layer on top of that your plume, your methane plume imagery. So that, and we'll see more pictures of those plumes, but essentially the plume sits on top of your aerial imagery to the extent where they can pinpoint the leak on your facility, tell you the rate that it is leaking, and even tell you like how high the leak is off the ground. Your results will say, oh, this leak is 5 kilograms an hour at 15 feet off the ground on your tanks. And so you can get out to site, drive exactly to that place, find it, and hopefully fix it right then and there. So these are our results. hot off the press. So we flew 145 facilities in 2 days. And that doesn't just mean that the plane did like one swipe across our field. How this works is that they do a full field flyover, and then any location where they find a leak, they fly it again, and then they'll fly it again, and then they'll fly it again, really up to 5 times. So anywhere between 2 and 5 times to confirm any leaks that you actually see. And the goal there is to really suss out what leaks are persistent versus what are intermittent. We know there are intermittent leaks out in the field. Every time you open a thief hatch and close a thief hatch, that would be an intermittent leak. A blowdown on a compressor, that would be an intermittent leak. It's something that someone doesn't need to go out there and fix. It's just a short period of time and then it ends. It's not something where you need a work order and all these things to actively fix. So that's what those multiple flyovers will do for you, identifies the persistent versus the intermittent leaks. So of our facilities, 68% of them showed 0 detections whatsoever. And that includes both intermittent and persistent leaks. So a really good ratio of absolutely no leaks coming out of our facilities. And of the 32 facilities that did have detections, 27% of them were persistent. So I'm going to focus most of the rest of this presentation on the persistent leaks because those are really the ones we care about for reporting purposes and repair timeframes and all of those metrics. So we'll focus on those beyond saying that the highest emission source that we did find out there was a compressor blowdown. It was an intermittent leak. It resolved itself quickly. Besides that, our persistent source that was the most common was also compressors, and it wasn't blowdowns. It was stuff like packing, coolers, a pop-off that's leaking by, something along those lines. And of our most frequent intermittent source we found, no surprise to anyone here, tanks. Those thief hatches are being constantly opened and closed, and so we saw all of that action on these flyovers. But the really good news, especially when it comes to tanks, is we saw them resolve themselves. So anyone who's worked in the basin or any basin for a long time know that thief hatches are historically kind of the worst offender when it comes to leaking. Not just being open, but you open, you close them, they warp, they get a little sand in there, they will leak. Everything under the sun will cause these things to leak. But what we saw in our survey was a survey of 857 tanks that 0 thief hatches were open. So kudos to everyone here for closing thief hatches. And on top of that, we only found 1 persistent leak on all of our thief hatches. So not only does that mean people are closing them, but it means they're making sure they're seated right, they're making sure they're clean, they're making sure that no emissions are coming from these hatches, despite all of the work that you're doing up there. So really, really, really incredible results, and a huge kudos to Latch the Hatch and everyone who's following these guidelines. So that's the great news. Of the not so great news, we did see a lot of leaks on compressors. These are some images that you will get with these flyovers. So you can see here on the left, that is an image of one of our facilities. That is a compressor blowdown. It's an intermittent leak, it resolved itself, and there really wasn't much to be done beyond identifying that we've caught a compressor blowdown and we quantified it and we kept it for our records. The image on the right is one that has more persistent leaks on those compressor points. So this one I think had both a packing leak and a cooler leak. And those, obviously we had to call our compressor company out to have it repaired, but all resolvable. The kind of 3 that you see on the treater system there, those are burners that were out. Pretty small leaks when it comes down to it, but we did catch them and we did get to resolve them. So, of course, we did see that 1 thief hatch. So that's here on the left, the 1 thief hatch that we caught. My field guy just had to go up there and really just wipe down the hatch, and it was fixed. So an easy peasy fix and really great result when it comes to thief hatches. Burners, were a really interesting one because we saw them both on persistent and intermittent leaks out there. And what we saw was that newer systems, newer burners that had burner management systems, those were really identified as intermittent leaks because they were resolving themselves, because that's part of the process of how these things are built. They'll relight themselves. Whereas the older ones, they were a persistent leak because they don't actually fix themselves. Someone has to go out there and repair that emission source and relight it. So it was a very interesting one with burners. And as you know, we have a ton of them out there. So what's next for aerial monitoring? We talked a lot about find and fix here today. And really the goal of aerial monitoring is to get away from a find and fix program. We want to use our resources more effectively. And so move away from find and fix to what I call trend and engineer. So we want to spend those resources really looking at the data and figuring out how to fix those leaks before they even start, rather than kind of chasing our tails around the field, looking at sites that aren't necessarily leaking. For SM, a big next step for us is integrating our flyovers to a compliance framework. And what that means is not doing redundant inspections. So a lot of folks who do flyovers now are doing ground level Quado A, Quado B inspections, and then also flyovers. And they'll use the ground ones for compliance, and they'll use the flyovers for, best practice activities. What we want to do is combine those two things so we're not doing redundant things and we're really putting our energy in the right place. And then a big takeaway for us was what we need to work on is driving process improvement and automation. We have so much data out there. If we start tying that data into the results that we're seeing in these flyovers, we can get things repaired a lot quicker and really improve the process, because it can be a bit of a bear to go out there and find all these things in the time frame that you're required to.